Welcome back to the best darn live cooking show on the intranet, my friends. My name is Tamara, but you know that. Welcome back. So it's late, and I just realized I don't have any bread, and I need bread tomorrow. So we're gonna make some, but don't worry, it's not gonna be a long-winded thing. I'm gonna show you a life hack on naan. Now, I call it a life hack because it's not an actual naan recipe. What it is it's a basic bolillo recipe, basic bread, white bread recipe, like the most basic bread you'll ever make. But we turn it into naan because we can do that. And by adding the yeast, it just gives it that same chewy texture. So if you're in a rush or if you don't have eggs or milk and you just have these 4 basic ingredients, you're in luck. So let's just get started, okay? I've got my mixing bowl right behind me here. And so I'm gonna grab that bad boy and we're gonna get some water going. We need water between 100 and 110 degrees to activate our yeast. So let me just grab a container for that. And then we're gonna grab some water. And then we're gonna use this good old-fashioned little machine called microwave. And now let's talk about gadgets. I've got this fancy schmancy little 6-prong digital thermometer. You don't need anything like that. You just need one. And if you don't have a thermometer, just pretend it's going to be your baby's bath water, right? Warm enough to be called warm, but not hot, because you don't want to kill these. So let me just grab my little fancy schmancy here, my 6-prong bad boy. And this is on Celsius, and I like that because it forces you to stay in the Celsius world, because only America, my friends, is on the conventional, everybody else is on the metric, the standardized, I should say. All right, so let me just grab this guy. Now, everything about this recipe is about timing, as with everything else in the kitchen. So you don't want to lose too much time fumbling with things like this, right? You want to have these sorts of things ready to go. But around here, we like to keep it real. So this is the reality of it. But look, we beat the clock. And now let's just see what our fancy schmancy little digital thermometer has to say about this, shall we? Let's look at it together. We're gonna go to number 4 here. We're waiting for number 4. What does that say? Number 4 says 67 degrees. So we're gonna go in for a couple more seconds here. So 30 more seconds should do it. And this guy's really cool, 6 prongs. You can use it for your barbecue, so you could stick 6 prongs in that grill and cover the grill and have your meats, up to 6 different meats being red while you're sitting there enjoying your beer or your whatnots, you know. And so when you don't want to use the other prongs, you can just disconnect them, put them back in the box they came in, and once again, we beat the clock. So that's fun. Hurry up, Mr. Microwave. So slow, man. Okay, so it's 1:34 on my clock, because like I said, it's late. And we're just gonna jam on. We wanna try and keep this under 30 minutes, okay? So we're waiting for number 4. Here we go. Oh, 61 degrees Celsius. So we're there, my friends, we're good. As a matter of fact, I think it's a little too hot now. Ah, jeez. Ah, jeez. All right. Because you can't fake it, you know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. So now it's gonna be tested again. 51 degrees Celsius, so I think that's good. Okay, so now we need to measure you. Oh no, that's definitely still too high. La da da. No. Okay, the fun of the metric system, my friends. 53, okay, we're good there. So we're gonna go here. We're gonna measure out, oopsies, about 1 cup there. Bloop. Now we're gonna grab some sugar. We're gonna grab 2 tablespoons of sugar. leveled. The sugar will help activate the yeast, but I think you already knew that. Okay. So 2 nice little tablespoons of sugar there. And then I've got my yeast pre-measured here, so we're just going to go in with 2 tablespoons of yeast. 2, not 1, but 2. Then we're going to give that a little quick stir. Okay. Got some yeast here. I think I know what that looks like. And then we're just going to let her do her thing. We're going to bloom it. Meanwhile, we're going to get our salt ready. So let's just set that back there. Now, something you need to know about this show, in case you've never been here before, is we keep it clean as we go and we talk about it. So while we're waiting for that to bloom, we're going to take advantage of this downtime and put our little tools away that we don't need anymore. That would be this. As I like to say, put away what you've already used so that you don't get confused. It's a nice little rhyme to help you remember. And, you know, you usually want to stay at your station, so you don't have to, like, put it away, but just set it aside. You know, we're done with it. Just set it back there. Find a designated space where you can put all your post stuff. And so if you've ever seen a cooking show before, you know that this is called our mise en place. And I have my little mise en place here in front of me. And once again, I'm going to remove what I've already used so that I don't get confused. So I'm going to take this sugar, put it right back here next to my temperature thermometer. And I'm going to use this, so I'm going to keep that right in front of me. Now here I have 4 cups of flour, bread flour, okay? So we're going to go right into the bowl with that. Now we're going to add some generous amounts of kosher salt. I do not measure my kosher salt when I do this, but for the sake of this recipe, I will suggest 2 heaping tablespoons of nice coarse salt. Some people will say use fine salt. That's up to you and them. I use kosher salt, and I love the way it produces the bread. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, I have man hands, so I don't necessarily need to measure this because I do this almost every day. But for the sake of being technical, let me grab my measuring spoon. This is a teaspoon. So I'm going to do that 4 times. 1, 2, don't be scared. 3, and 4. And that is approximately 4 tablespoons. Now I'm looking at my yeast doing its delicious yeasty thing. So I know now, as far as timing goes, what I have to do next. I'm just going to put this aside for 1 second and turn my oven on to 425 degrees. Okay, you might be wondering why I'm turning the oven on if I'm making naan, which is on the stovetop. Because I'm making naan for you. For me, I'm making some stuffed cheesy bolillo breads. Because I can use that recipe 2 different ways, and we're going to do that. But for the sake of the timing of this episode, I'm not going to hold you hostage while my bread bakes in the oven. I could give you story times. I'm very chatty. But I will just make you this, and then you'll go on your merry way, and then I'll enjoy my cheesy stuffed breads. I will post a reel about it, though, or at least share it somewhere, so you can see the final product. But for now, you're just going to grab any dry utensil, and you're just going to mix it, and take that salt and get it in there. Now, here's where you can have some fun. You can add some garlic powder here. You can add some dried basil, because these make amazing flatbreads for pizzas. I'm telling you, the diversity in what we're doing here is endless. Okay, so if you know that you want to make a dessert pizza with it, maybe leave that garlic and basil out. If you're first time doing it, maybe keep it simple, If you do know you want to make it for a dessert pizza, then maybe you can add some extra sugar, some brown sugar to change it up a little bit. Things like that. But for now, we're just going to keep it basic. So here we have it mixed. Now, the only thing I'm concerned about is the machine's noise. Everything else we have worked out. So, this is my yeasty yeast. See how fluffy and delicious she is? Let me move my sliced cheeses out of the way. We'll get to those. Now, I'm going to take all of my liquids and I'm going to mix them together before I start to mix my wet and my dry. So in this case, I'm going to grab a very generous amount of extra virgin olive oil. I've cross-referenced my recipe with several others. I'm the only one who uses this much, and I'm okay with that. So what I'm gonna do, because we talked about it, we like to keep it clean as we go. I'm not gonna grab another set of spoons. I'm just gonna give this a quick rinse. Because the whole thing about being here with me cooking is reality. I like to keep you in real time, make sure you know the actual reality of the situation, because most people tell me the same thing. They don't like to cook because they don't like the mess. But what if we could reduce the mess or actually keep it clean as we go? What if by the time you sat down to eat, the only dirty dishes were the ones you were eating off of? Because that's how I've been living my whole life, so I can show you how to do that. But you don't even have to take it that far, you know? You can just learn how to minimize the mess, and I can show you how to cut recipes, pots and pans down, so you can just avoid using 6 pots, maybe only 3. And then we'll get down to 1-pot dishes. That's really where the party is. And talk about air fryers. It goes on and on, my friends. That's 4 tablespoons. So that's where I'm gonna start. I'm gonna leave the cap off. Why? Because I need the fat in here, that's why. It's our best bet for pliability, that's why. Now I'm gonna create a center in the middle here, and here's unfortunately where you and I have to, the trust process has to begin between us, because I don't have a glass bowl here, so would you just trust me? Source, trust me, bro. No, so normally I would suggest adding the liquids in slowly, but we're just gonna go for it today because we're running the clock, that's why. And I'm gonna show you that the only difference would be manageability. So there's also another way you can do it, which is adding your dry to your wet. Now this is debatable. Go ahead and discuss it in the comments. I don't care. What I'm going to do is do it like this. So I've made it kind of like the center of a pasta well. And now I'm just taking my nice rubber spatula and I'm scraping around the sides at the top, and then I'm going down. So I'm starting at the top and I'm just kind of guiding it right to the center all the way to the bottom. And then we're just kind of flipping it as we do that. So we're spinning, spinning, spinning. And then right when we get to that full circle, we're going to go under and then over. Just flip it over all the way around. Do that a couple times until you feel like you're not going to have flour flying everywhere when you turn the machine on. That's the point in this step. And also because I want to make sure it's not too dry. What am I talking about? The amount of water you're going to use is always going to vary a little bit. There's so many variables. There's the dryness of your flour. There's the altitude you're in. There's the actual weather of the day. Same thing applies to candy making. So, you know, this is why it's nice to watch 18 different videos on making one thing, because we're all going to kind of share a different bit of science and methods. You can't get it all in one unless the whole episode's about technique. But when you're making a dish, you know, there's only so much information your brain can retain. So we try to decide and pick and choose what we're going to share in that moment. So here I have a nice shaggy dough, and it definitely looks like it needs some more loving. So I'm going to start with my good old fat. That's going to be about 1 more tablespoon. Maybe 1.5. And that's going to be, let's measure this part out, because the water really will trick you. You'll think you need like 1/2 cup more when really you might only need a tablespoon or 2. Okay, so let's start there. And again, you know, this is the idea, is that we want to cook live. We want to show you just where the kinks are going to be and how you should just keep moving forward. Trust the process no matter what. Let's go with 2 more. So this is, at this point, we are at 1.5 cups of water for 4 cups of flour. Okay. And we are there. I can tell you already. So now I'm just going to make sure there's not too much dryness going on at the bottom. I will let the machine do most of it, but I just have this thing about making sure the bottom gets some loving. All right, so we're going to let that run. See how my spatula is coming out more dry? That's always a way I know she's good to go. And so while that's occurring, we're going to talk about everything else that's sitting in front of me. So far, this is our mess. You're going to put your hook attachment on. You're going to want to lock her and then give her a low. Okay, so since I'm making bread for myself, here I have a beautiful pot of water, and that's going to help my crust. So I'm going to put this in the oven because I'm making a harder crusty, kind of like a bolillo meets a baguette sort of situation. So I'm just going to drop that into my bottom shelf of my oven. Okay, and then up top I have just a simple big old frying pan. I don't even have a flat griddle out. Nothing fancy needs to come out. You can just use a nice big pan. Very thin bottom though. Keep going. Very thin bottom. Okay, so now I have some cheeses that I sliced up. This is some aged cheddar and just good old-fashioned cheddar. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stuff the bread with it. That's right. It's a good time party. So meanwhile, I'm going to make one stuffed, maybe two. And I'm also going to make just a regular basic bread. And I'm going to prep the stuff that's going to go into it while this guy's going, because it's all about timing. So I'm going to make one of my favorite sandwiches with my other piece of bread with this delicious feta cheese here and this beautiful heirloom tomato and some basil that I have in my fridge. So we're going to prep that. I'm going to give this a quick rinse and just wash it. Now we're going to give her a nice little robe. Heirlooms are very special. They mean a lot to me. I'm growing some right now. Keep your fingers crossed that they just make it, because I've never successfully grown food. Okay, so that's my baby. And then I'm going to grab whatever's left here, this situation. And we're just gonna prep that while the other guy's doing its thing. Now, I am very much a critical thinker down to this point right here. I'm asking myself, which one of these guys is going to make a bigger mess? Which one do I not mind bleeding into the other one? How is this going to be the best situation? And my brain is going to tell me, cut the tomato first, because you don't want the remnants of feta cheese getting on your tomato, because that'll make it kind of dirty and ugly looking. Sorry. But she's pristine. She went to Harvard. Don't do that to her. So what you're going to do is you're going to slice her first and put her aside, and then you can cut up your feta. Now, can you hear that slapping? That's how you know she's about ready. So we better hurry. Look at this gorgeous baby. She had good parents, is what I'm saying. Okay. Fun fact, when you get to the end, turn it around. You'll have better cane control. Except unless there's a stem in the way. All right, like that. And there you have a beautifully sliced tomato. Let's put that in our little ramekin here. Ooh, that's good. Let's just get that little stem right on out. Just want to spare as much of that tomato as I can. Gorgeous. That'll go right in the compost, my friends. All right, let's dry that off. And then let's cut this as evenly as possible. So I'm going to cut off the wonky part and just save that for a salad or whatever. Got a little Greek salad in the fridge, so that's perfect. That'll just be exactly what I need for that. So those little odd ends can go there because we don't want to mess up the sandwich. And then we're just going to cut that the same width as the tomatoes, about 1/4 inch. Okay. And you can even, you know, abandon the sandwich and make yourself a little Greek caprese here if you'd like. How gorgeous would that be? Maybe I'll do both. All right. Let's do it. Now, here's another part of the splitting my atom brain cells into 4. What you're thinking to yourself is, there's no way that could be ready. There's no way. And it's not. See that? But remember, we're doing 2 things with this dough. We're splitting time. We're life hacking time. So instead of it just sitting there, keep mixing, what I'm going to do is, now that I finished this, I'm going to put this aside. And now I'm going to take a portion of that dough, because my naan, I can work around the elasticity of this because it's still going to rest for a minute or 2. And then I'm going to just let the rest rest. I'm going to let the rest rest and do its homogenization and all that fun stuff. And then it just, as time goes by, it'll get looser. And these minutes will help me make it more manageable so I can knead it by hand for the last few minutes. But just it sitting there alone is already doing me good. So now that I have this little situation cleaned up, I'm going to move my prep aside. I'll see you in an hour or so. Okay, and then I'm going to do exactly what I just told you. But first, this is one of my favorite things. First of all, I always have a little extra flour for the surface. You know how they say, like, 2 cups of flour plus 1/4 of it for the... Yeah, just always have a little reserve for you. I do keep my grains in the fridge because that's just the best way to store them, in my opinion. But I do always have just this little guy. That way, in case he doesn't get contaminated, it's just the littlest bit, not all of it. So now here's what I do. I take my fingers and I very generously throw them on top of that hook, and I let all that flour guide me down so that my fingers aren't sticking. See how clean that is? And then all those little remnants. Flour is like your best friend for this dough. So there you have it. And then you're just going to throw that in the sink. Remember, because we're always thinking about how to keep it cleaner faster. That's your little step there. In my sink, I have a bowl with water ready to just submerge that guy. Okay, this is nice and warm. She needs attention though. So remember, we're going to just take a little bit of this.